We are gathered here on the 22nd of May, American Baptist Men of New York State, and it's my privilege to announce our Man of the Year, Mr. Reverend Thomas Bell. Now that's probably the best round of applause I'm going to get. A couple weeks ago, Chris Blackwell, Rich Russell called to tell me that our Man of the Year would be Tom Bell. I was pleased, thought that was an excellent choice. Besides being a successful pastor for many years, Tom has been active in AB Men and other denominational activities for a long time. Really, he's been a driving force for many of us in the ABC NYS. Rich and Chris also asked if I would handle the presentation. I agreed, even knowing that because of health concerns, Tom could not be here to receive his award. Further, knowing that Tom and I are pretty close, the guys also asked if I could give some kind of introduction to you as to who Tom is. Not all of you may know Tom. He and Sharon moved from this area more than 8 years ago. I couldn't believe what I was being offered. A chance to roast Tom. The opportunity of a lifetime. Truly an offer that couldn't be refused. Of course, his absence kind of takes away some of my fun. But eventually this will get back to him. So Tom, when you get to watch this video, here's to you. With love, of course. Tom has become one of my closest friends in recent years. Find that quite interesting since I didn't like him the first time I met him. Maybe a bit strong to say I didn't like him, but there was one particular aspect that I found disturbing. His arrogance. By the way, he's heard this from me more than once, face to face, so please don't take this as backstabbing. Tom is a golfer. He's not just a golfer, he's one of those golfers. One of those people who are strangely overly obsessed with the most boring of sports. I am not against those people. I married one, and I fathered another. On Sunday afternoons, my wife has to have all of our TV sets tuned to whatever golf match may be on. I'm not allowed near the remote during that time. Our son has 2 degrees in golf course management and is presently the superintendent of a country club in Michigan. At least he turned his passion into a profession and even gets paid for it. Anyway, Tom came as pastor to Cooper's Plains in January of 2003, and I had landed in Elmira just prior, November 2002. Not sure how soon it was after that we met, but I know exactly where it was. The Fellowship Hall of First Baptist of Corning. If we were there right now, I could show you the location of where we were sitting at the table. When you first meet Tom, you don't forget. Tom had a brace on one of his wrists from a motorcycle accident. He was grumping that it was ruining his summer, keeping him from golf. Complains how you identify a true golfer. If for some reason they're unable to play, as was Tom, there's loud grumbling about how much they're missing. If they are playing, there's complaints how badly the game is going. I think one reason Tom plays as much golf as he can, and he knows that this is it. There's no golf in heaven. Golf cannot be played without weeping and moaning, and you know what the Bible has to say about tears in heaven. I do know a little about the game. Not that I really care, but through osmosis from near relations, I've picked up a few things. So I asked Tom, what's your handicap? His reply, anything it needs to be. That means he is so good that he can control things any way he wants. That was arrogance as far as I was concerned. And we've had that same conversation recently. And he hasn't changed his tune, and neither have I. Anyway, we managed to get beyond that, and we would encounter each other often through our Living Waters clergy connection. Both of us were strongly committed to attending our various meetings, so we were together frequently. Soon, our wives became friends too, and the four of us socialized often. Then, there was a time that Tom announced to a small group, I believe Scott Green was present, David, me, married the perfect woman. I was a little surprised to hear that, but then Tom described the perfect woman. A woman who loves shopping, a woman who loves sports and hates shopping. By that definition, my wife Charlene does qualify. I would never call her perfect. We'll be on 50 years by the end of this year, but by Tom's definition, you've now met the perfect woman. I'm not sure what that says about Sharon. When Tom was moderator of our association, he asked me several times to take on the position of communications chair. It took a bit of convincing, but I finally agreed. Although it's been years now, only recently have the bruises on my arm faded. For those of you who don't know him, Tom is a gregarious extrovert, a classic type A personality. For those of you who do know him, I doubt that any of you would disagree with that statement. Type A personalities are generally ambitious, competitive, impatient, and domineering. That's Tom, but to his credit, he generally uses those traits in positive ways. Just one example is domineering. For years, my wife and I have hosted a summer picnic at our home for the Living Waters clergy. Tom has been there many times, and each time he takes over, dominating the conversation with jokes and stories. However, he is so charming and his stories are so interesting, no one cares. We just sit enraptured listening as Tom holds court. I'm not going to try and relate his stories as I'd be forgetting details and I don't want to hear about it from him later. I'll say this, there's a lot of stuff about golf, of course. Tom is pretty good at the game and he's had the opportunity to meet and play with some of the biggest names on the tour. Great tales about many of them, except for the late Billy Casper. Tom did not appreciate his Billy Casper experience at all. If I remember correctly, he thought Casper was arrogant. Go figure. Besides pro golfers, Tom has encountered a number of other famous people. He had lunch in Syracuse one day with Hall of Fame shortstop Ernie Banks, Mr. Cub. Another time, Tom was in San Francisco and went to Joe DiMaggio's restaurant, which was closed at the time. Tom, of course, banged on the door until the Yankee Clipper himself showed up. Tom got himself invited in and had coffee with Joltin' Joe. Tom didn't say, but that would have had to have been a Mr. Coffee machine, wouldn't it? I know I'll miss some details on this one, but I love it, and it's too good to leave out. So here's a brief outline. He was with his uncle, flying in his uncle's private plane. The uncle did something wrong, and when they landed, was instructed to pull into the hangar, where they expected to be reprimanded. Already in the hangar was another plane, and from the writing on the side, it was obvious the plane belonged to Muhammad Ali. Somehow they got connected to the Great One, were dismissed from the airport authorities, and Tom got to have lunch with the champion. No one else but Tom Bell. It's another story I'd be remiss to neglect. It's been called a classic incident, with the subtitle, The Day We Got Thrown Out of the Classic Cafe. That's an exaggeration. We didn't really get thrown out. I don't think we were even close to getting tossed, but the idea probably crossed the owner's mind. Classic Cafe was located over on Pennsylvania Avenue, just about a mile from here. It has since closed down. That wasn't our fault, I swear. Our practice was to, after our monthly clergy meetings, was to go to a local restaurant, and the choice of the day was the Classic. If you've never been there, the decor was an old-fashioned diner. Black and white checkered tile, 45s tacked up on the walls, along with pictures of Elvis and Marilyn. In the background was playing the best music ever, 50s and 60s rock and roll. There were 10 of us sitting at a long table. I was at one end, Tom was at the other, with 4 guys down either side. Sitting next to Tom were Jeremy Spencer and Steve Reynolds. When placed together, that's a dangerous triumvirate. On my right was a gentleman that we all knew, but someone who wasn't a regular with us, not even half-time. I know who it was, but it'll remain nameless for now. At the other end, Reynolds and Bell started singing along with the music. Then Jeremy made a comment about the song or the quality of their singing. Laughter ensued. More songs, more laughter, more jokes. There was increasing hilarity coming from down there. In the meantime, the gentleman next to me says, "I hear you're from Detroit," and proceeds to ask me questions about the state of things in my hometown. High unemployment with the closing of automobile plants, unstable economy, corruption in the mayor's office, horrendous crime rates, etc., etc., etc. I was born in Detroit, raised in Detroit, lived in Detroit more than 30 years of my life. It's a difficult place with lots of problems. Regardless, I still love it. We were visiting once, and I still regret that years ago my wife wouldn't allow me to purchase the perfect t-shirt. It read, "I'm so tough, I vacation in Detroit." Normally, I'd love to talk about my city and my state, but things on the other end were getting rather raucous. Amidst the jocularity, I can't hear or follow anything down there, and my partner is totally oblivious, managed to keep the conversation on this serious level. There's a near riot going on down there, and his only acknowledgement was to raise his voice a bit so I could hear his questions. Got to the point where every customer in the restaurant had to wonder what was so hilarious, including me. Finally, the waitress approaches me. She bends down and whispers in my ear, "The owner wants to know who you people are." Just a bunch of Baptist preachers. Well, maybe we didn't get thrown out, but we did establish a reputation. When Tom was leaving Cooper's Plains, Sharon wanted them to move near family in the Syracuse area. Tom wasn't too certain about all this, but he let Sharon go looking. She eventually found a condominium in Baldwinsville. Tom knew that God was speaking to him when he discovered that the patio doors of the condo opened up onto the 17th green. For Charlene and myself, it was almost perfect. Our good friends were moving away, but they would only be about 3 miles from our daughter, Angie. Angie didn't have room for us to stay with them, but now we had Tom and Sharon's extra bedroom whenever we wanted to see our grandkids. Shortly after they moved, Tom invited our Living Waters clergy group to go up and see their new digs. Charlene and I missed it because we were on vacation, Detroit, but several others made the trip up to Baldwinsville. In Tom's tour of the condo, on the second level, he showed them his office and a spare bedroom. I know I've got the details right on this one because I've heard it from several people. Tom said, and I quote, "When the Daniels come, this will be Charlene's room." Charlene's room? I guess I was relegated to the swinging glider on the patio. Tom, I said, is a gregarious extrovert. Even with that personality, some of us have been stunned at some of the things he's done. He used to have what he called a Walmart day. Regularly go to Walmart, hang around the entrance, kind of like an unpaid greeter. He'd help people with packages and other things, but mainly he was there to talk to people. And he had a lot more to say than "welcome to Walmart." Tom would engage people in a conversation with the purpose of eventually sharing Jesus with him. And he was quite successful at that. I've got to admit, he's a braver man than I am. I'll wrap this up with my favorite Tom story. By now, you shouldn't be surprised to hear that Tom is more than a competent salesman, which is his long career before God put a pastoral call on him. Whatever and for whomever, Tom excelled in selling. 2 years running, He was #1 salesman for a national company. At the annual conference and banquet, Tom was honored in front of the whole company, recognized for his outstanding success. The next day, he was sitting in an audience with a couple hundred of his co-workers, waiting to hear a motivational speaker that had been brought in for the occasion. You know the kind, the guy who gets paid $25,000, $30,000 for 90 minutes of spouting stuff that everyone should already know, but somehow gets everybody charged up and ready to go out and bust their backside. The speaker was introduced. His theme was priorities. And his first words are, Tom Bell, are you here? Tom responds, right here, and timidly raises his hand, if you can imagine Tom doing anything timidly. Guy says, come on down, I want to talk to you. So Tom goes down front with no idea what's going on. Tom, I know some things about you, and I've got some questions, but first I want everyone to know that you and I don't know each other. We've never met before this moment, have we? No, we haven't. As I said, I know certain things, and we're going to ask you to share some stuff with this whole crew. Okay? I understand you're the company's top salesman. Yes, sir. Big deal last night. You were honored and they gave you a plaque and everything at a banquet. Yes, sir. And this is 2 years in a row you've been the #1 sales among all these fine people. That's right. Well, that's not just something that just happens. Success like that takes determination, work, and planning. Success like that takes knowing your priorities and never forgetting them. Tom, I have no doubt that you know exactly what your priorities are, and you stick to them no matter what. Yes, sir, that's correct. I do. I want you to tell everyone here your list of priorities. Can you do that? Really? Yes, we want to hear your priorities. If that's what you want, sure. Hands Tom the portable mic. Please, go ahead. What is your top priority? My #1 priority is my relationship with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. #2 priority is my relationship with my wife. #3 is my kids. #4 is golf. #5 is my job. There's a few seconds of silence, seemingly approaching eternity. Motivational speaker shakes his head and says, what did you say? Tom says, I said, my #1 priority is my relationship with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. #2 priority is my relationship with my wife. #3 is my kids. #4 is golf. #5 is my job. The guy just stands there, saying nothing. Finally, he shakes his head, walks out, leaves the auditorium, and disappears, never to be heard from again. That's Tom Bell, my good buddy and your man of the year.